We're going to get started with track one. I just want to welcome you to track one. People are probably still going to be coming in, but the session will explore solutions for the issues women face at the startup and entrepreneurial level. And at the end of the track this afternoon, we'll end it by getting feedback, your feedback, specific things, specific strategies for fostering and supporting female participation and leadership in startups, small businesses, and small organizations. So I now want to welcome the first panel on accelerators, incubators, and other startup resources. You guys can come up here. And Kevin, I assume that's Kevin. Kevin will start them off. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. No, that's fine, actually. Yeah, you guys can come on up, and then we can take some time to introduce you. Okay. So, my name's Kevin Liu. I'm the director for the Bixel Exchange. We are a technology center at the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. And we're a good example of a public-private partnership with the Small Business Administration and the LA Regional SBDC Network. And an example of an organization trying to extend mentorship services and advisory programs, as well as educational programming and programs to increase participation in technology at the high school, community college, and CSU levels, so we have more job-ready and diverse applicants coming into the technology sector. So today I'm joined by an incredibly inspiring panel of leaders and executives who have been impacting startup communities in various ways, either from a policy level or from a media level, or as well as representing the startups themselves. So with that, I'd actually like to ask a few framing questions to get things started. But first of all, we have Linda Moore right here with TechNet. Nice to meet you, Linda. And my first question is, what brought you into technology? And tell us a little bit about your background over at TechNet and what you do.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. So I have to say I'm fairly new to technology specifically. My background is really in government and politics. I was deputy political director of the Clinton White House, and during that time, the boom in the tech economy was the defining, moment and defining part of the Clinton period. So when I think of all the prosperity that people remember from that time and would frankly like to go back to, it was all because of the tech boom. And Vice President Gore was a huge proponent of it, but President Clinton was too. So my background really, as I mentioned, is in politics and presidential campaign politics and in government. I've worked for 10 years in the U.S. Senate, 8 years in the Clinton White House, and now coming to TechNet. What we do is we represent everything from small startups to the biggest and most iconic companies on the planet. So we have Apple, Google, Facebook, Yahoo, all of those kinds of companies, but we also have small and mid-sized companies as well. So we foster a great policy dynamic at the federal level and at the state level to foster innovation. We block and tackle on legislation that really impacts those. So you're probably thinking, well, what does that mean about women in entrepreneurship? Like, why are you here to talk about that? I was the only woman of 5 that were put forward for this position, and I beat the guys and got the job. And part of it is because I said that I wanted to run a campaign for the tech industry. As I look at the political landscape right now, one thing I think is very obvious to all of us, and I certainly saw from the get-go, is that while the tech industry is always thought to be the problem solver and all about the future, the one thing it's not leading on, and that is a political liability for us, honestly, is the fact that it doesn't include enough women or people of color. It's a liability, and it's something that we have to tackle. You can see it in policy inflections like the fact that we're so dependent on H-1B visas. There are a lot of people, office holders at the federal level, at the state level, who rightly so point out that we're way too dependent on bringing foreign-born people to take over the best and highest paid jobs in our economy. And that is something that is causing us a real problem as we advocate for our policies at the federal and state level. So what I want to do is change that. I want to change the STEM pipeline. That's going to take a while, you can say, but at the same time, I think you have to have a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy. As a woman, I think that I can represent the gender part of that. One thing you should know is that just last week, the heads of all the tech associations and the heads of all the civil rights organizations got together for a dinner, off the record, but I'll tell you what happened. We all got together to talk about the fact that, they won't care, we all got together to talk about the fact that as long as companies and as long as nonprofits continue to do one-offs and just do things all by themselves, it will never, add up to more than the sum of the parts. We all have to work together, and we all have to leverage all the assets that we can bring to the table together to really move the needle. And I'm proud to say that some of our most active members and some of our board members are high-profile women, like Safra Katz, and like Marissa Mayer, and like Sheryl Sandberg, and like the CEO of Oracle, just to name a few. Kim Polese, who's been a high-tech leader for decades now. I look for more women CEOs to bring into TechNet and to elevate them and to raise their profile. I look for more women to be on our board. And I'm really looking forward to working with Google and Cisco, just to name two, who are the biggest sponsors today, who are very, very committed to this issue, to work on this problem. I've got lots of great ideas, but just a few things I want to mention. You've heard some great things already this morning that the United Nations is doing. One other program I want to highlight is the State Department started Women in Tech. The Tech Women program brings women from all over the country to Silicon Valley and the San Francisco area to be mentored by women leaders in some of the companies that are represented here today. There are at least 38 members who come over every single year. And there are wonderful, wonderful companies, Dell, just to name one, who has started their own women's entrepreneur network. Steve Case at Revolution is investing in so many women entrepreneurs just at the Google Demo Day. Google is doing an amazing program of 40 Forward, bringing together 40 communities that are dedicated to really finding and funding women entrepreneurs. I could go on and on and on. I know that there have been a lot of comments about how negative the landscape is this morning, and I certainly am clear-eyed about that. But I think there's a lot of hope and a lot of things that are happening right now that are very exciting. I can see a huge shift in the conversation about women in tech. Starting in 2020 with President Obama's Entrepreneurial Summit. And then President Clinton starting the Tech Women program, and then companies really getting involved and starting their own programs. Those all started in 2010. We now find ourselves 5 years later, and we're having much more public discourse about this issue. One thing I want to point out that I thought was very exciting is just a couple of days ago, Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, said that he was combing through 16,000 of his employees and their salaries to make sure he ferreted out any gender gap in pay and to fix that immediately. So on and on, you just see more and more CEOs, female but male too, talking about this issue, and that's what it really takes. You have to make it socially incorrect, politically incorrect to do the kinds of things that are happening right now, unconscious bias or conscious, that keep women and minorities from moving ahead in tech. And that's what I am committed to doing. And I'm glad to say that the member companies of TechNet, we're backed by CEOs and senior execs at the highest levels in the most politically savvy and engaged companies in the world. And they are committed to this too. And that's what it takes. And I know that working with them, we can make a difference short-term and long-term.
Excellent. Thank you, Linda. I'm going to hand this over to, with that, Tina Dewey-Wujik. You are the CTO over at Nplug, a local technology startup that has developed digital signage software and has become one of the biggest successes here in LA for the technology startup scene. Love seeing that we have a woman CTO here as well. I'd love for you to share a little bit about what got you into tech and what kind of perspectives you have to share today on the panel.
Thank you. So I pretty much wanted to be an engineer from when I was 5 or 10, and that was it for me, and I wanted to know how things work, and that was my only interest. I also grew up around 7 male cousins, so it was a little bit of the spite because they would always exclude me, and I just want to prove that I'm as good as them and that I can do computer things as well. And I graduated in computer science in Poland, and then I moved to US to work for Microsoft. I was brought on H-1B visa, and on Microsoft, afterwards I worked also for Motorola, some investment banks, and I always fought for myself because that was my attitude. I came to computer science and to tech to prove that I can do it. But like after a few years, it gets old, and it really, I came to realization it doesn't have to be like that. Like, it's not okay that women have to prove themselves over and over, and for the things that they can do the things that men get for granted. And I find that like the most hard thing about this is the unconscious bias, because for big companies, they have policies that that are against sexual harassment and against any open remarks. But people, the employees, they have their stereotypes, and maybe unconsciously they do discriminate women, and they make every day hard to work. And those are the little things that it's hard to complain about, because it's not enough matter there to make a complaint, or to, even when you talk to someone, it's maybe hard to explain. But it does make women work harder, and this is the reason why women leave their careers, because they just get tired of it 10 years, like in the opening keynote, the statistics. So when I left the corporate world, I decided to join a startup, and that's how I ended up in Unplug. I was one of the few first people there. I was the technical co-founder, and we did not plan to build a company that is great for women. We just wanted to build a company that is great for everybody to work with. And from the very beginning, it was. So at Unplug, I'm proud we have a great gender balance. 50% of our C-level people are women. Our CEO is a woman, CTO, myself is a woman, our chief of sales is a woman. We did not have a quota. We did not plan to do it like that. We just wanted to have a company that is great to work for everybody. And the culture was always like the #1 thing for the founders. And to the point where at the beginning, even the early team members, they all lived together in one house. We wanted to have people who are passionate, people who are really committed to the job, people who see the big picture, and people who are respectful of others. And I think that resulted in the culture that we have today. And I'm proud to say it was a big change for me. And it's like a breath of fresh air to work in this company, because I did not believe that the tech company could be like that. So my perspective is, I believe this can be replicated. And especially, maybe it's much harder to implement this kind of policies in a company that already has thousands of employees and they have their culture, and the change is always harder. But especially for young companies that are just being started, it's important to start with this in mind, that we want to hire people who are not biased. And if people are biased, we try to make them realize their bias and cure them of this bias. And it definitely helps if you have women in leadership roles, because it's hard to be biased against women if your boss is a woman, and if your coworkers are women, and if they are in a truly technical roles and in truly leadership roles. In some of the big companies I worked before, the recruiters were really happy to hire women because they could check the mark. They have more women. Now they will be at 30%. And even if the woman is not super qualified for the job, it's always good to hire her, because you can get her a lower level position. And for example, you end up in the team where the engineers, the developers, is only 2 women out of 40. But on the test team, you have 70% women. And company-wide, it evens out, and it looks great on paper. But for women who actually want to do something, who are serious about what they work and want to be respected, and they are competent, it becomes hard, because they become, it becomes very stereotypical. So I think it's very important that when you hire people, companies should really take it seriously and should hire people who are non-biased. And people who interview, they should also be very conscious about it. They should realize that they can be biased against women. Even women often are biased against women. It's not only men. And realizing this, for example, if a man is interviewing a woman for the position of engineer, he needs to realize that he's not looking for someone who's like him. He's looking for someone who's competent to do a job. It can be a woman, can be different qualities, can be same qualities. It's just the realization that people have bias, and curing this bias, I think it's very important, as well as having women in position of power and competent women that give a good example. So that's my perspective on this.
Thank you. I think that's a key distinction to make about this panel as well. We're talking about startup communities and startups themselves. There's a great advantage that we have working with startups because you can build a culture from the ground up. Simultaneously, you also deal with the challenges of being a startup, which is it's faster grind. You don't have the time and the ability necessarily to make the types of internal organizations and groups that larger corporates can afford. And with that, I think there's a need for infrastructure and support to make sure that these startups can get those resources in place right away. And with that, we have a great person who runs an organization that does exactly just that, and that's Jess Erickson from 500 Startups, which is a global accelerator program with touch points around the nation. In addition to that, I believe you're the founder of Geekettes as well. So I'd love for you to share your perspective on that, Jess.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Great to meet you. So where do I begin? I'm originally from Minnesota. I moved abroad and pretty much spent the last 7 years in Asia and Europe. And there I've been working with technology startup companies, helping them grow from employee 3 to employee 50. Went through the Series A, Series B. I've seen the whole evolution of a company. And I was running General Assembly, which is an ed tech company. I think you have a branch here in LA that's doing pretty well. I ran the German branch and built it from the bottom up. And the problem I had when I was living in Germany is the fact that there were so very few women who were attending classes, who were attending conferences, who were building companies. Whether it was mastering code or founding companies, there were very few. So I got a little frustrated with the fact, and then one day, I won't name who it was, but it was a young CEO. He was 21 years old, and I said, hey, look, I know you're looking for a CTO. There's this great woman who just left Google. She's coming to Berlin. She wants to start a career here. Why don't we bring her in for an interview? And he said, no, I don't think that makes any sense. I'm like, why is that? And he said, well, because she would distract all our male developers. And so that was sort of this like watershed moment in my life where I thought, oh my God, I'm in this like fast forward moving industry, and yet here's this 21-year-old who is so backwards thinking that he didn't even realize that he had said what he said. So I immediately got angry, but then I wanted to funnel that anger and that frustration into something positive and create change. So that's where evolution of Geekettes started, and that's when I said, look, let's start to bring women together, talk about these issues, see if people are also dealing with similar situations and how to best handle them. So what started off as a group of 5 women at a dinner now has blossomed into 4,000 women in 7 cities. We're mainly in Europe, but we do have 2 hubs, one in New York City and one in the Twin Cities, where I'm from. And through that, we've launched a number of workshops, everything from iOS development to how to pitch to an investor, how to start your own business. We've hosted a number of all-women's hackathons. We've hosted women's demo days where women can pitch their startup ideas to investors, among a lot of other great things. And with this community, I've seen such great change. I've seen women step up to the plate, become more confident, find a mentor for life. I mean, I wouldn't have made it to where I am today without an awesome mentor, Zoe Adamovich, who's out in Berlin. And through that experience of building Geekettes, I just realized there's so much you can do on a grassroots movement, and you don't really need a ton of support from the top down. I'm not gonna lie, we did get great support from Deutsche Telekom, Sony, Google, and a number of other great companies, but a lot of the groundwork was done through a group and a community of women who just had a passion for changing the ratio. And so, at the end of my experience in Europe, I wanted to move to Silicon Valley. I wanted to see the epicenter of tech, the Mecca as they call it. I wanted to figure out what was really going on at the birthplace of technology. So packed my bags and I headed to 500 Startups. Have any of you heard of 500 Startups? Okay, I'd like to say we're one of the more progressive groups in the Valley. I know that someone mentioned earlier in the discussion that VC is hardcore, and yes it is. It's very male dominated, and actually there's only 6% female VCs in the entire industry, which is a really low number. But what 500 has done really well, and what gravitated me towards the company, was the fact that half the managing partners are women, there's a female founding partner, half of our venture partners are women, and we've proactively tried to invest in female-led startups. Last time I checked the data, we've I think invested around 275 female-led companies, and that was largely to do with the fact that Dave McClure and Christine were really trying to push to bring women in, and they did that through an initiative called 500 Women. So we launched a female syndicate fund. If some of you are not familiar with syndicates, it's an ability to be able to become an investor yourself. Each and every one of you could just throw in $5,000 into a startup through AngelList and fund a company. So we launched one that was really aimed towards women. We funded 3 companies already through that syndicate, and we're going to continue to invest in 7 more. We've committed to investing $1 million into 10 companies, so that's $100,000 each. And this is just the beginning. Like even though I'm the director of marketing, I'm really pushing on the community. I want to drive more diversity into Silicon Valley, and I think there's so much we can do from both the top up and the top down and bottom up. And you know, they made a case about Ellen Pao earlier, and I was watching this case very carefully because I work in VC and I want to understand the dynamics. And my 3 takeaways from the Ellen Pao case was, 1, no matter how small or large a company you are, you have to have strong HR. Absolutely. If there was an HR in place at Kleiner, I'm guessing Ellen could have gone and spoke to someone about it before it escalated to the point it did. Secondly, I think you need to be aware of conscious bias, unconscious bias. I think companies are starting to do more exercises, especially Google. They've launched an unconscious bias workshop series in Silicon Valley. And thirdly, I think fostering diversity. These 3 are so important, and if we had been more progressive in all of this, and if Kleiner had stepped up and implemented these 3 and really put it into the DNA of their company, I don't think that court case would have ever happened. I don't think Ellen Pao would have had to go through what she did. But at the end of the day, I'm optimistic. I do understand his frustration. It's not going to be easy to change the ratio, but I'm super excited that there are like all these thousands of groups sprouting up all over the world to want to make change. And if any of you in here are thinking about starting a company, I would love to chat with you after this talk. Thanks.
Thanks, Jess. Also, you know, as an entrepreneur, I think a perspective that we have on this panel right now also is coming from Esprit Devore. Esprit brings experience coming from the action sports industry as an entrepreneur, which we all well know is very male-dominated as well. And in addition to that, founded We Are LA Tech. And with that, it's become a major bridge to communicate and connect the resources in Los Angeles to the entrepreneurial and established business community. I'm excited to hear your perspectives, Esprit.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, everybody. Oh, come on. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Yay. Well, I've never had an experience, actually, that Jess had that's like blew my mind about the 21-year-olds. I've worked in male-dominated industries like my whole entrepreneurial career. I started building tech companies when I was a teenager. And yeah, action sports, we would travel around the country shooting with like Tony Hawk and Shaun White. And it was really exciting. I grew a media company, and now I have We Are LA Tech, and which has like 3 things, which is the podcast, which right now I'm on Apple's Inspiring Women's Voices, which is pretty cool on their homepage, and it has a calendar of all the LA startup events and a job board. But being a podcaster inspired me to create the Women in Tech podcast. And for me, because I hear that there is a lot of opposition or like objective, stuff happening for women in tech, and I've never experienced this stuff, I asked myself, like, why is it that I've never experienced this stuff? And I think maybe like my father, I spent a lot of time with my father. I played Nintendo, like a lot of video games. I like went to motocross events. I went skateboarding, all this stuff growing up, and maybe it just exposed me in a way to like be hanging out with boys and become like a tomboy and stuff like this. And I had this different perspective, like going into everything. And then I'm like, well, what if my father would give me these entrepreneurial books when I was growing up, like things that successful entrepreneurs learned when, after everything. And I was like 15, 16, 17 being exposed to this stuff. So I was like, what if in the Women in Tech podcast, it was just a whole bunch of people that shared how success became possible for them, a whole bunch of amazing women that shared that, so that women listening or girls listening could be like, wow, I could be that too, And then maybe it could even shed some light onto the guys, their male counterparts in like why not to feel any kind of resistance to having women inside their organizations. But yeah, I'm proud to be, I don't identify as a woman in tech. I identify as an entrepreneur. Jess actually brought that up on a phone call earlier. It breaks my heart to hear stories like that. Like, it's so crazy to me, and I know that this stuff, or I've heard, I don't know personally, but like I've heard that this stuff exists, and the little bit that I can do to just like be an empowering, create empowering platforms to show people that they can achieve anything that they want to achieve, male or female. In this case, with the Women in Tech podcast, it's the intent is female. Like, that's yeah. I've lived a really magical and challenging life being an entrepreneur. I would never recommend it, and I highly recommend it. It's like totally, it's like, it's a gift to be an entrepreneur, but it's definitely, it's not like do you guys know Tim Ferriss, the 4-Hour Work Week? It's definitely not like sitting on the beach with with a martini or something. It's like, it's really hard work, and anyone who wants to step into that world, like, I just want to show them that it is possible. And the world of code, I mean, I was on Prodigy in my father's office when I was a little girl, like, and that's how I like got on the computer, and I would be on the instant messaging and stuff. And my parents made up this thing called the office police, because I was in my father's office so much, like stealing his computer. And I mean, that's how you kind of get familiar with like code. And my dad would like encourage me to play video games because he'd say it was great hand-eye coordination and stuff. And I feel like that early exposure to technology is probably what made me so comfortable with technology later on. And so, and just so attracted to it. Like, I wanted to learn, like, what is Python? You know, what is CSS? What is Ruby on Rails? What are all these things? Like, I want to know. I want to learn how to build. What do they mean to me? What do they mean to my life? And so to just expose people to that. But my introduction's not as long. But yeah, I'm rooting for you guys. That's what's important. And if you want just to access me, I'm here. Like, I make myself really accessible. You could connect with me after. Yeah.
Excellent. I think, today, once again, we're going to be focusing on scalable solutions for the technology community here. And when you look at everyone here, they're bringing respective change at a national, a local, a global perspective. When you look at entrepreneurs, again, and you look at what makes up a successful entrepreneur, I think most people would agree it's someone who's so obsessed with serving a targeted demographic or a targeted niche community that they won't sleep, they won't move unless they do that. And when you think about that characteristic, that's something that extends beyond just males. It extends beyond, all borders here. But as we look at that, I think we have to ask ourselves, what types of programs are out there and what types of services can be out there to cultivate this talent at an early age, cultivate them sooner and before everyone else can get to them. And I think one key question I'll ask the panel here is, there's a time and place in this movement with women in technology to develop women-led groups that don't necessarily include men in that, and then allows them to build up their confidence and their experience in a group where they feel safe and trusted. And then there's times to include men. What are your perspectives on that, and how can we build on that to maybe integrate that into more of a solid system here? So, Linda.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to touch on one thing you said at the start
Sure.
about, how you can foster things that can really go to scale.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do at TechNet is we really promote computer science in the schools.
Yeah.
So there's still predominance across the country that if you want to graduate from high school, computer science classes don't count towards your degree. And we're changing that state by state by state, and also at the federal level too, which I'm really excited about, because the point of getting them early is critical.
Yeah.
But we're also seeing, and this was highlighted earlier today too, the engineering explosion we're seeing now at major universities, MIT being a great example of it, but Princeton and University of Arizona being another, of engineering classes with a context of doing social good. Sorry, I keep doing that. I think I have to take this off. Of doing social good is attracting so many women. And so you get a majority of women in these classroom experiences so that they can go out and learn these hardcore engineering skills and then take it to scale. Just a couple things. I mentioned some women-only initiatives. the Tech Women Initiative at the State Department is a great example because you bring these women from far away across the globe, other side of the globe, together with women in Silicon Valley and San Francisco. And we've seen that they've not only been able to get great role models and mentors and business understanding at the home of technology, and then take it back to their home communities across the world that lifts their own family, but also their community out of poverty. And you have this wonderful dynamic that is built up, certainly in women. I can't attest to this for guys in the audience, you'll have to tell me. But they stay in touch. They build their own social networks, email lists, Google lists, and Facebook and Twitter feeds that they stay in touch with over and over and over. And so they continue to grow and to expand the message and to bring more women into the process. So I think you need both. I think you definitely need to have those women-only programs. Dell's is a women-only program too, the Women's Entrepreneur Network, and they introduce those who need a spotlight to women in the business and in media who can put that spotlight on them. So, raising the profile of women, all kinds of women at the entrepreneurial level, putting more women on boards, all of that's critically important. But the men standing up for women too is also incredibly important. The He for She program and the men who are CEOs of major tech companies and mid-size and startups too, fostering that I want to support women and help them grow in this industry. I think that the story you told about the 21-year-old is sad, A. B, I think it's also why you tend to see, and this was commented on before, as men get older and they have daughters and they have a different kind of relationship and vision of what women can and should be in the workforce, and the kind of support they should get and the kind of money they should make and the kind of progress they should be able to make, it really changes. And I wish that all 21-year-old guys could be that enlightened, but sadly I don't think that they are, and it comes with age. I'm not going to say there aren't guys out there that age who aren't enlightened and have that kind of attitude towards women, but I think that's a part of it. So I guess to your point, I think it takes both. It's wonderful to have women-only groups, but the men getting involved is critically important because, let's face it, they still are the dominant force in leadership positions across the industry.
Excellent. And Jess, I'm going to throw that over to you too to talk maybe about some of the advantages and disadvantages.
Sure. I don't think, there we are. Very, very good points made. So when I first started Geekettes in Europe, I had a lot of backlash. A lot of people said, why are you ghettoizing women? Why are you placing them into a special interest group? How do you think this is actually going to create change if you're putting them into one little corner? And I tried to flip that reasoning and show them that there are organizations like Women 2.0, Women Who Code, Girls Who Code, organizations that I noticed in the United States that were really creating change and bringing women into the industry that normally wouldn't join. And by creating this environment and embracing solidarity between women, it's like almost a movement in itself. So I said, just give it a few months. Let's examine the impact in 3 to 6 months, and then you can decide. But I've only just started, so please don't start to criticize before I even begin to build. And so I kept pushing forward, and then I think the one marker, or the one key event that changed it all was our hackathon. And I was talking to you guys about this earlier, but when women go to a classic hackathon, which is a 48-hour period, maybe 24 to 48-hour period where you're just coding and you're building a basic prototype that can later be pulled into a product or built out into an entire product. It's a competition, it's intense, it's a giant room like this filled with 100 engineers just working really hard to meet that deadline and get it going. And oftentimes these hackathons are very male dominated. You probably spot 1 or 2 women in the corner. So I started interviewing women in Berlin and asking them, why aren't you hanging out at these hackathons? What's pulling you back? And they said, well, it's just not very friendly for women. I don't feel comfortable hanging out in a room with all these guys for 2 days, and I'm not really excited about it. So I thought, let's flip it and let's try to do an all-women's hackathon and see if that might change things. It did. We kind of feminized it in a way. We added a yoga room where stretch if you retired. We introduced all organic food. So instead of like pizza and beer, which was a traditional staple at these hackathons, we had fresh fruit, yogurt, all kinds of great stuff. I'm not saying that men don't like that. It's just we added a new twist. And then we had an Etsy craft corner. Etsy sponsored, brought in engineers from New York. We had an area where you could decompress, use a different part of your brain if you were tired of coding. And all these little finishing touches actually worked. And we had 200 women apply to our first hackathon. We were the first all-women's hackathon in Germany. And we continued to repeat these and do them across Europe and in the States. So again, that's just an example. And I see a hand raising in the back here. Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for being feminine, and hell, I got a manicure a couple days ago, first time in 6 months. But I think there's just little touches, and then a lot of the men that attended that hackathon were API reps that came from local startups who wanted to introduce their APIs for women to build on. And they said, hey, look, I want to introduce yoga to my hackathon. I want to like have healthy food. And we were just starting to change the culture of what a hackathon was. I had no idea what kind of impact that would have. And sure enough, we started introducing all women's demo days, and you would see women applying from all over Europe to present in front of VCs. The products that they were building were for female sub-industries. Women building products for women. It was so exciting to see these technical solutions because I have been working with young 20-year-old graduates from Stanford forever, and most of the time they wouldn't be able to pinpoint or come up with a tech solution that might be useful for a 50-year-old woman living in Nairobi, right? So it was just like this whole new kind of window into innovation that blew me away. And had we not done these more women-oriented demo days and women-oriented hackathons, I might not have come across some of these brilliant ladies. And my favorite hack from the first hackathon we did was called Monkey See, Monkey Do. It was a mother who came from southern Germany. She flew up and she participated for the weekend. She created an awesome tablet tool for her autistic child who was having trouble getting through the day. Children who are suffering from autism, they need repetition, they need routine, and she created Monkey See, Monkey Do, which was a chance for the child to place monkey doing different scenarios throughout the day in a specific order, so whether it was like reading a book or having a snack or brushing teeth, going to bed, and as that child finishes each task, clicks on the monkey and then gets points. So she created like a little bit of gamification into the hack. And for me, that was the first time I saw at a hackathon, and I've been to many, a mother creating a technical solution for her child. And that's, again, why we shouldn't disclude all of these awesome products that women and even older women would make. Because I think there's a lot of ageism as well as sexism in the tech industry today. So by opening up a platform and attracting more women and embracing solidarity and working together to create the change, we're going to see so much more innovation in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's what I'm really bullish about, and that's why I continue to push this and talk about it.
Excellent. Esprit, I've got a question for you. What role do public social movements have to change public perception on resources available to female-led startups? And what's your experience in that space?
Years ago I created the Women in Action Sports organization just so people, can you guys hear me okay? I have a pretty loud voice anyway. Just so people in our community can feel more, just feel that there's more of us that just exist, like we all live in a silo of what we're doing in our own world, and we're very segmented from it. Even as entrepreneurs, just take out the woman part, just being an entrepreneur is a very lonely life a lot of times. Wouldn't you guys agree? But it seems like we're all sitting here, we're all entrepreneurs, right? So why is it so lonely? Because we go through these emotional processes. And so I like creating environments where we could all kumbaya together and see that we're not alone. When years ago I created the Entrepreneurs Anonymous Club, where I had a movie theater in my office, and I'd have just people come over. We weren't allowed to talk about business at all, and we just got together and just shared being an entrepreneur. And like I said, the Women in Action Sports organization, and now the Women in Tech podcast, I think it's really important in order to change perception to just unite and be a part of knowing that, Jess, legit that you could go up to Jess after this and like say, I want to start like 500 startups is a really big deal. Like it's awesome. And that you could, no, and it's dope. And that you could legit, being in this room, come up to her after this and be a part of the 500 startup community, like so you don't have to be alone. I think that in itself is changing perceptions because it all starts by uniting together little by little and then we expand. I hope that answers your question enough, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And similar point, I think something raised up on one of the earlier panels today was someone talking about anonymous submissions, about workplace conflicts in the office, and I actually love that point. I never even considered that myself. But I have a question for you, Tina. You're working with a fast-growing technology startup. Mplug's what, maybe 3-4 years old now?
3 years.
3 years old now. So as you've expanded as a team, and doesn't have to just be about women-male conflicts, but conflicts in general. How has a startup like yourself that's been nimble but fast-growing been able to address those types of conflicts internally? Do you guys had like formal ways of evaluating conflicts, or has it been something that's dealt with on a case-by-case basis?
Well, so far, actually, we didn't have much
That's
conflict.
good, yeah.
I think the culture is like very supportive, and like we only hire people who are like-minded, and there's really not much space for like people who are there to advance themselves over the company, and the culture is, we emphasize the culture so much that so far we really did not have any problems.
Sure. On the same point that we mentioned to Esprit, Mplug's also taken a role in really driving a lot of women in tech events with Nancy Liu and yourself and a variety of social movements. So kind of the same question, what role has social movements played in highlighting what your success is, and how can that be a role model to the rest of the community?
Well, I think the fact that Nancy is so active in speaking at all the conferences and being like a role model for women who want to start a company, that's a big thing. Myself also try to speak. I'm going to mentor other women and not only women. I think also internally we put a great emphasis on mentoring women, or in general mentoring employees. That's maybe related a little bit to the previous question, where, for example, as Success Story, our CEO, who's a man, and he happened to be a web developer also. He hired a person to coordinate sales, a girl, and she did a great job with a spreadsheet, and he was so impressed that he says like, well, you would probably be an awesome engineer. How about I teach you how to program, right? So he taught her how to program, and she moved to engineering, and she's doing an awesome job. And I think that's basically the culture of people of the mentorship and putting the right people in the right places, no matter if they're women or men. That's very important.
On the role of mentorship, at the Bixel Exchange, we run a pretty large startup development program. Actually, Julie Thorne-Ingalls, sitting here in the front, is one of our advisors and works with a lot of our women-founded teams. But a question to the panel would be, with mentorship programs, have you guys found that there are certain skill sets or certain focuses in these programs that have had more impact than others in expanding the role of women in technology? Linda, you have so much experience with a wide variety of programs. I'd like to ask you first.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A lot of our companies are very involved in the United Nations Girls in Tech program, and it's just sort of that basic fundamental of you can't be what you don't see. And so having so many women across technology in bigger companies and medium-sized companies take that time out, and it's fostered and promoted by their company that it's expected that you will go do this. So for a lot of our companies, 20% minimum of the workforce, but it's heavily women, go do the mentorship programs. So it's US 2020 and a whole lot of other programs you guys, I'm sure, have heard about. But it's that wonderful pioneer spirit that you find in entrepreneurs. And we have lots of women involved in TechNet who are serial entrepreneurs. They have that wonderful, I want to go spread the news and I want to bring more people along kind of mentality. And I've seen that in so many women, less so in men, but it could be that I just have less experience with that. But
Sure. With our program, often, when we first launched, I would have assumed that certain skill sets we wanted to develop and focus on with our entrepreneurs was financial literacy, pitching to investors, being, and working on the technical skills necessary to develop your companies. But as we've gone through the program, we found that leadership development and speaking confidently, learning how to present yourself to a room of male-dominated VCs, for example, is perhaps equally, if not more important. Jess, what's your experience with that? I mean, you've run so much different mentorship and advisory programs, so.
Yeah, so we partnered with Google and launched a few mentorship programs. And what we would do is pair up 50 women who are just entering the industry with 50 women who had the experience of like 3 to 5 years in the industry, and we would match them based on similar backgrounds and interests. And collectively, we would meet together as a group once a month at Google, and we would bring in a keynote speaker to talk about how to pitch to an investor, how to negotiate for a higher salary. That was the #1 requested workshop. Women tend to hold back and don't ask for enough. And like, I think that's why this whole Sheryl Sandberg lean-in movement really took storm across America or even in Europe, because she was finally shedding light on the fact that, yeah, women don't earn as much as men. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that's the truth, but it is. And so I actually took her book, Lean In, which I know half the people love, half don't. I actually loved it, and I broke down 12 of the chapters, and I adapted each one into a workshop series. So I took the talking points, and then, yeah, we had a discussion around each one, because it was like, okay, you read about it in a book, but let's talk about what it's like in real time. And so that was adapted into the mentorship program, and soon enough, there was these amazing discussions that we were having that most times I didn't even have the discussion before we had launched the mentorship program. It opened up like an important talking point for all of the women that are out there is like, how do we reach parity? How do we become equals in the industry? What are the steps we can take to do that? And then you'd have the older women in the mentorship program who had been through all of it and had offered amazing advice, stuff that I'd like to start publishing in blog post series if I can. And that's why I think it's so important. When I was knocked down a couple times and I was just getting really defeated about the industry and I just was tired, I mean, being an entrepreneur is exhausting. Like, you really stretch yourself thin, and even if you work at a startup, you're working long hours, 10, 15 hours. I was ready to throw in the towel, and it was my mentor, Zoe, who coached me through those tough times and said, look, like, here are all the possible outcomes. Here's the impact you can have on the industry at large. Stick through this. And she, you know, if I got tired or sad or frustrated, I could just call her. And it was that connection I had with her and a feeling like she was an older sister and someone who was going to help me through the tough times. That's when I realized every woman should have a mentor. And it doesn't have to be a female mentor. It could also be a male mentor. There are some really great male sponsors in the industry who want to help out. But I did feel like I had a deeper connection with her because she did tell me all the struggles she had being a woman in this industry. But you know, at the end of the day, I think every woman should seek out, whether it's a formalized mentorship program or not, try to meet as many people. If you click with someone who's wise and older and you can learn from, it's only going to propel you faster and it's going to empower you throughout the whole process. So yeah, I mean, kudos to Google for helping us out with this. Again, another large tech company who's trying to change the ratio. It was really awesome to see Reverend Jesse Jackson put pressure on these tech companies in the Valley to release their data. And I hope more companies will do so in the future, because that's what's going to drive change. That's what's going to put the spotlight on the numbers and hopefully encourage these corporates to chip in and help organizations like Geekettes build out mentorship programs in the future.
Absolutely.
Can I?
One small thing.
Oh, yeah.
I just,
Yeah, and then we'll over to
sorry,
Sri
just
after.
really quickly queuing off of what you said. I don't know if anyone noticed it yesterday, but the Pope talked about equal pay for women yesterday. You know, I mean, I love that it goes beyond just our little community. That's when you know you're really creating social change all across the world. I'm a Baptist, but I love the Pope. He's like making climate change and equal pay for women like huge priorities. I say go.
So this is more on the singular thing. I know we're talking about like the world vision, but on just individual, your intuition is your oracle. I live by that. Act as if nothing can hold you back. And I'll give you two stories. One is I met with Sequoia Capital, one of the largest venture capitalists in the world, and I literally did not have a meeting, and I just flew there and went with my instinct and met with Sequoia. And by the end of the meeting or that life experience, they had connected me to this amazing woman, Nicola, on their team, and she's still my mentor today. And then that also, same thing, led me to like go to Google and try to sell my company and end up having the cops called on me. And I like ran with my backpack. But the point is, I always act as if nothing holds me back. And I look for every single open door to yes. So like I go and I try to open every door, and some doors are no, and then I just find the door to yes. And so just as a woman in business, a woman in technology, a woman in action sports, like I consistently every single day act as if there is nothing that holds me back. And I think that that will empower women overall, because if we act as if we can ask for the higher salary, which like that's so true, then just ask it, and just like, yeah, we're afraid to ask for that higher salary, but just, okay, take that high fear. You can sit right here while I ask for this high number, because what's the worst that can happen? They can say no, then just find the open door to yes, you know, and they'll just come a little bit lower. And it's constantly. So it's more on an individual level, but it's important, I think.
Tina,
Yeah.
please.
So I enjoy mentoring people, both women and men. And like every time when I mentor male engineers, I have this additional satisfaction, because I believe that when they are off in the world afterwards, this will be like one less man who's biased against women. So that's like...
It's an excellent point. It's something we like to see too at the Bixel Exchange when we have, I think, 5 of our 13 mentors are female. And when we pair them with men, it's exciting and encouraging to see the responsiveness and the ratings in that when we get their survey feedback. I want to open it up to questions right now as well, and let the audience chime in. And one maybe closing point is, I think when you talk about developing startup communities, which is really what this is about, inclusion and adding diversity to the table is what rounds out a startup community and makes it more sustainable. It requires the collaboration from people from across industry sectors, people who work in policy at a national level, people who work with programs like 500 Startups from the private sector that are impacting things heavily, organizations like the Bixel Exchange, which is a public-private sector involvement, and of course the startups themselves, which is the most important factor here. So I think when you think about how to impact this community, it's best to think about what are you good at doing, what can you do well, and how can you execute that to drive this conversation forward. So with that, I'd love to ask some questions, or open it up for questions. In the back.
I'm the CEO of a small startup. We're early stage. In fact, my board is at a meeting right now, and I'm having text conversations with candidates in this room and want to be in Detroit. But my question really comes back to the intersection of all of this, and that is, there's a lot of great programs out there, and you go on Angel List, and there's all these accelerators, and you can apply, but it's a cold application. And
I'm sorry, can I get you to use the mic? Thank you. If you have a question, can you come up to the front?
Usually my voice carries.
Okay.
That's probably for the recording, right?
And I'm going to hold the mic, actually.
So I'm the CEO of a small early stage startup, and my question actually comes to the intersection of a lot of the points that you've been making, which is you go on Angel List, you're out there, you're meeting. I have great mentors in Silicon Valley, successful entrepreneurs, all men, by the way, who are opening doors for me and just have been my angels literally in this process. But it's still extremely lonely. It's still extremely challenging. You go, you apply, they're cold applications. But prior to launching this company, I was a research neuroscientist at Stanford, so I'm one of those elite privileged Stanford girls. You can insert joke now. And, you know, it's much like applying to NIH grants. You got about a 9% acceptance. They don't really know you. You're just a name. You know, so at an individual level, you know, these programs are great, and it looks like a lot's being done, but when I talk to women CEOs in Silicon Valley, and I'm a member of a group that get together once a month. There's about 10 of us, startups, you know, different stages. We're all having the same experience, which is penetrating these programs is really difficult. Getting noticed is really difficult. And if you haven't noticed, I'm not shy. So that's not the problem. But, you know, at an individual level, as a woman CEO and founder, getting it done. And what are your recommendations for penetrating these programs and making more connections to actually get it done? And I'm talking very early stage here. So thinking accelerators, startups, seed rounds, angel rounds.
Yeah, I can guess I could comment to that.
Sure.
Since we run 4 accelerators a year, 4 cohorts. But yeah, no, it's incredibly difficult and it is a lonely process. And I think accelerators can be very impactful for when you're just getting started. With 500, we accept around 30 companies each quarter. So not a lot, but not a little. However, we do have a great team that supports these startups. We do individual-based interviews to really get to know each founder. We want to see traction. We want to see customers, obviously. We don't want just an idea. We want to actually see that there's a potential business to be built. We hired out an awesome team to help with distribution tactics, how to acquire even more customers and scale your business. We really place a lot of emphasis on building out a really rock-solid mentorship program. So we're bringing in and vetting experts from all over Silicon Valley. They could be, into ad tech, or they could be someone who's founded 5 businesses and sold 3 of them. We want to bring in a group of people that can really coach and help you every step of the way. I can't speak on behalf of other accelerator programs, but I think it's really what you make of it. If you really can tap in and give it your all for the 4 months that you're in the 500 accelerator program, you're going to come out doing pretty well. But with that being said, I think in general, startups, 90% of them fail. And oftentimes, the first time you get knocked down, you do it again. It's almost infectious. I'm sure you've been through it too, Esprit. It's almost like, oh, I gotta give it another shot. I got another great idea. I'm going to push forward. And that is really what I think Silicon Valley startup world is like. So I'd say be selective, really know who's in the network, what doors can open for you. Look at the success rate. How many of the startups have raised a Series A? How many of them had raised a substantial amount of seed investment when they first got started after the accelerator program finished? But I would love to talk to you more about our accelerator program afterwards. And yeah, I hope that answers your question. It's broad, but yeah.
I'm focusing much earlier stage. I'm familiar with your
Yeah.
organization, and I've looked at it and know about it. It's a great program. And
Yeah.
You guys have a higher acceptance rate than a lot of accelerators, actually.
Right.
I'm working with Springboard Ventures, who are just, if you guys don't know who Springboard Ventures are, everybody in this room should know who Springboard Ventures are for women entrepreneurs. And Joshua Henderson I just adore him. He's one of the best guys, supporting women in technology. But it's the early stages where I think it's even more difficult. So I'm not a candidate for you guys right now.
Do you mind if I say something?
That's the piece where I think the penetration is harder. And I'm not just asking
Like,
for me. I'm asking
one thing I do, so I know events are up for debate, whether they're worth your time or not to attend. Everybody asks me that every day, like, what event should I go to? Like, what events are worth my time? The thing that I have found from attending events, hands down, is I've been attending events for so many years, is network, right? And as an early stage, I've gotten to know legit, like, the top world business leaders, which is like blows my mind that I know that these people are on my cell phone, all from like going to South by Southwest or like going to Silicon Beach Fest or like, I mean, this isn't really, I went through Astia, which is more like an accelerator, but like I was able to meet, I don't like to name drop, so I'm not going to say who, but I was able to meet a CEO that I was desperately trying to meet via Astia, via one of my contacts there, because we had a day, and this may apply to you if you're maybe in a more early stage kind of like meetup or something. We had this activity where we were able to write on a board like, who would you like to meet? And I wrote the 3 people I wanted to meet, and the girls in the room, Astia is an all-women program that helps funded whatever, like fun. I can't describe it right now. It's really cool. Check it out, Astia. So like, I wrote on the board who I wanted to meet, and the girls in the room, knew someone who knew someone, and they introduced me. And I really think this, especially since you have an outgoing personality, this world is like a treasure map of people, and like, you just meet someone at an event that connects you to someone else that connects you to someone else. So like, if you're based in LA, like I would go to the We Are LA Tech calendar because it has all the LA startup events. It's not events produced by We Are LA Tech. We don't produce events. It's just everyone's event related to LA startups. I'd find the ones that relate to you, and I would just make that your job for a little bit, not for long term because you need to spend time on running your actual business. But if you're looking to form like a network of connections, go there. Another kind of like hack is if you're looking to raise money, look at look at the companies you would admire and who they raise money from. Befriend those companies in order to like get to know like the investors and stuff like that. Would you like agree with that? Like
Oh, yeah,
reverse engineer?
It's all down to
Yeah.
the networking and who you know in this industry. And
Yeah.
I think that's why some people who may be more introverted or who don't have a huge network to begin with join an accelerated program because it opens up the doors and it gets all the intros and the meetings are much easier to set up if you have kind of a brand behind you backing you. But certainly events have been super powerful for me. I am a serial networker as well.
I mean, does that help
yeah.
you though?
I mean, and again, I'm not just asking for me. I'm part of this group of women, and this gets brought up a lot. This is stuff I already do. So I'm really, really lucky that I've got an incredible group of people that are opening doors. I've got a top Silicon Valley CEO.
What's the pushback for the women you're trying to be supportive of?
A lot of it, a lot of it has been, we just had dinner last Saturday night, so there were some fresh stories around the table about connections that set up potential angel meetings, and there were some horror stories just in the last 10 days, 3 horror stories of those angel investors, perceiving this introduction as a sexual opportunity, not a business opportunity, which was really, not an atypical experience. I was one of the 3 that had that happen last week. I know how to shut it down. I pick up and move on. I'm from Kansas. It's a
But
long story.
then once you we want to leave time for everybody. But like once you cross them off your list, you move to the next one, right? Yeah.
But I think you hit
You should blacklist them and let people know who that is.
I've thought about that. But
Yeah.
I think for some of the women that you're talking about that are more
It-
introverted or that are struggling,
I just,
is maybe communication coaching or other things of how to penetrate and identify a mentor. I've got that.
I just want to interject here. I'm sorry. If we can have this conversation, perhaps you can, after the
Yeah.
event. I do want to take another question, and we probably have about time for 1 or 2 more questions.
And also,
And,
I'd like to talk to you after as well. So,
Also, too,
yeah.
I just want to mention that for the next panel, 1.2, you can tweet your questions to hashtag UCLA WIT, UCLA WIT, so that we'll look for your questions as well.
If you do number 1, you said
And-
with 1, it will be easy to see questions.
UCLA WIT 1.
The number one or
Yes.
ONE?
The number
Okay.
1.
Yeah, and it's
Okay.
on all of your roundtables, that hashtag.
Oh.
Hi, thank you guys. First, thanks for Bixel, because actually I have a consultant, Craig Wilson, who is one
Oh,
of my
working with Craig.
mentors.
Love
Thank
it.
you. So thank you, Kevin. Mine is also just more of a suggestion too. I mean, I kind of agree with what's being said about as an entrepreneur and taking that journey and all of the networking, being outgoing, all of that. But you're talking about advancing women, and then I would say even women of color, which is really even more difficult. When you really think about it, and you talk about it's about the network, and I think we're recreating an issue that already exists by women being just like the men, because we're all saying who you know, who you know, who you know. One person told me I needed to know 4 people, and if I got 4 people who knew those people, then you can get in. And if you fill out the applications online for a lot of these programs, they actually have all of these social networks you have to be a part of, people who have to recommend you, people who you have to know. And if you really think about it, how many people do you really know that already know the people that you're trying to get in touch with? So there's such huge barriers, and I just hope that you guys begin to rethink how you're really embracing and trying to change the problem, because you're not going to change it in a sense that there's so many barriers. And you're talking about a Stanford graduate, you're talking about an NYU graduate, so you're talking about people who are already kind of at least a little bit in there, but think about all of the other people that you're trying to say that you're trying to reach. So my thing is more of a, just please start to think about more ways in which women and women of color can access these programs in a real way and not have all of these barriers of who you need to know, who you need to connect with, how many events you need to go to get to South by Southwest. I need a plane ticket, I need to get a hotel. To get to this is $500, to get to this is $100. So those are all barriers, and so I hope that we can begin. But to get to Bixel, All I had to do was call. So I'm just saying.
I swear I didn't pay her to come up and do this before.
And I never met him before, but
Yeah.
thank you. I'm serious. And I have someone who's amazing who's giving me time. And I'm not saying that's the only solution, but please start to think about other ways where you're breaking down barriers so we can have more access. Thank you.
On that one last point, I think one thing that addresses both questions here is you're starting to see a lot of pre-acceleration programs start to pop up around town. And here in LA, it's Startup Next is one. Bixel Exchange does some pre-acceleration work ourselves. And I think you're going to start to see lower barrier to entry programs for early stage entrepreneurs out there starting to launch. Federally funded programs like SCORE are out there to, and women's business centers at the state level are also out there. They're free programs to enter to get the initial concepts that might get you to the next level. I think there's a long way that those programs still need to come, but they are developing right now, and just keep an eye out for that.
Okay. We're going to take one more question and ask you to make it brief. We're going to go straight into the next panel.
Hi, my name is Lori Mitchell, and I'm the founder of Black Women in Technology LA. And I have a question. Hi, Esprit. I have a question about the community that you spoke about and how you feel that we can be more inclusive of women of color and Latina women.
Well, again, I've been out of the country for the last 5 years, and I've just returned 7 months ago. And I was living in Berlin, which was extremely multicultural city. So there were women from all over the world of all different race, age, and backgrounds, and it was really awesome to be a part of that. So I guess I've been blessed or lucky enough to be in a city that attracted women from all different backgrounds. But certainly, I think, and you nailed it on the head earlier. It's like, to see it is to become it, or to see it is to believe it and then become it. So I really think it comes down to maybe putting a better spotlight on women of all different backgrounds and really highlighting them through content creation. And I tried to pick women from many different backgrounds. We have hubs in Maastricht, all over Portugal, London, and I think we did a really good job of reaching out to all different types of women of all different backgrounds. So it's got to be in your DNA. I think it's at the core of what you do. If you're constantly thinking about diversity in every step of the way, you'll see the change happen organically. But yeah, not enough people are proactively doing it, and not enough people are putting enough spotlight on all these up-and-coming and next-gen leaders. So I don't know if that answers your question, but at the end of the day, spotlight, highlighting awesome women of different color and background, age. I'm a big advocate for older generations to start businesses and become entrepreneurs. Why not? I'm sure they're going to come up with awesome innovation as well. So try to be diverse in every step of the way.
Any other comments on that?
I mean, why don't, where'd you go? Oh, there you
In
are.
the back.
Why don't you start a podcast for Black women in tech? No, she's right behind you. Yeah.
And all those things are on my list of things to get done and do. Since I started in October, it was just a meetup group. There's over 100 women
That's awesome.
in this group now, and I constantly want to meet their needs. I've been in technology for a long time, and I see the same thing over and over and over again. And my goal is to make sure that even the young women coming up, the women that are currently there where we work, we do have, we are there, and everybody sees us.
How about this? After, whenever you're ready, just reach out to me. And if you'd like to start a podcast, I would more than happily get on the phone with you. But that's such a great power.
Sorry, this is really frustrating. I would like to suggest that white people spend time, money, and effort educating themselves on the systemic effects of racism.
Well, when we launched New York City Geekettes chapter, it just so happened that our ambassadors were Latin American, Chinese American, and African American. These three women are running New York. And the makeup of New York. And guess what? Because they're, the face of New York City Geekettes, they attract women from different communities. So again, I agree. There is a huge, huge, huge challenge we have here in America in terms of racism and class and access and privilege. Yes, those are all going to be underlying undertones of society. It doesn't matter in the tech industry or whatever industry, film industry. Look at the film industry. I don't see that many people who are from diverse backgrounds, and it sucks because it's an industry I was going to get excited about and wanted to enter 5 years ago, but ended up in tech.
Yeah.
Thank you for
But
your
yeah,
comments.
it's a tough topic
yeah.
to talk. That's a whole nother
Please
discussion.
share afterwards. Let's keep going. I want to thank our panel and our moderator for the discussion today, and we really appreciate. They will be available afterwards, so please, talk to them. So thank you very much. We're going to move to our next panel.